Let's talk a little bit about your members. How's business been for them in the last few months?
Business has been okay for them in the last few months. However, if we go to the second tranche, the $200 billion in tariffs, about 4 out of 5 of our 900 company members will be affected adversely. And we can't forget not only them, but so many other third country companies will be too because of the supply chain disruption.
So has anything changed on the ground for them doing business in China in the last few months with this rhetoric heating up?
Well, we had heard, especially from the Ministry of Commerce, about retaliations, qualitative trade measures. And this was talked about because Chinese can only put tariffs on so many U.S. imports because it's only about $170 billion. So the Chinese said, well, we can punish you in other ways. But frankly, and I've talked with folks at the embassy, talked with folks in other associations, and of course our members, we don't really see an uptick in these so-called qualitative measures like a surprise visit to your factory to make sure that everything's fine, or a tax audit, or a slowdown on certification. You know, that happens all the time anyway. Mm-hmm. We haven't seen an uptick.
And yet, we just heard last week from the president and CEO of NXC Semiconductors, Ray Clemmer, who came on the show and talked about how his deal with Qualcomm collapsed. Take a listen first.
There was nothing by the regulations or issues that China could identify that couldn't be resolved associated with the transaction. So it has to be political or some other reason. It's not about the transaction itself.
So how much of doing business in China has to do with politics?
I would say there's a good percentage or a good portion has to do with politics. You know, 3/4 of our members say that a strong U.S.-China relationship is important for their business. And part of that is just the economics, but a big part of that is the politics.
You've been following the China-U.S., the China market, and also its relations with the U.S. When was the last time that you saw tension so high?
Oh, gosh. Tensions were very high when I was working in the embassy back in the 90s when we had the accidental bombing of the Chinese embassy in Yugoslavia. It wasn't funny, actually. But tensions were extremely high at that point. But that was not economic-based. And economic-based tensions haven't been so high in my 30-plus year career with China.
Are your members talking about changing business decisions because of what's happening right now?
Members are doing their best to diversify their supply chains, which they probably should have done in any event, but now they're doing it a little more quickly. In terms of moving production offshore, that takes a few years, but that is in the plans, or at least the feasibility studies, for a number of companies.
What sectors are being affected the most right now? Industries?
Well, you know, the ICT industry sector has been affected actually a lot over the last number of years, and that is continuing. The consumer is still very strong. Industrial and manufacturing is being affected.